Brian Jones from Liverpool.
The Brian Jones Radio City Tribune's website welcomes a gentleman whose radio CV is encyclopedic. He has been at the forefront of the pirate radio days, has worked in commercial and public broadcast radio, and has worked in television. Welcome, Johnny Jason.
Thank you very much, Brian. Very pleased that you contacted me. Nice to be with you.
Johnny Jason.
How did a chap who lived in Peru, educated in Germany, and joined Unilever Export as a marketing trainee become a DJ?
You're telling a lot of my secrets there. That should not be broadcast. No, I'm only joking. It really came about because way back in the early 70s, 71 to be exact, I decided after a lot of soul searching as to what to do. I wasn't one of these people who decided very early on, I want to be a doctor or something like that, to get into radio. And the only place that seemed a good place to head to was Australia. So in those days, they were luckily looking for people from England, unlike now, where you've actually got to be someone worthwhile to contribute something to Australian society. But in those days, I think they would take anyone virtually. They certainly took me, so I just had to pay £10, and I was in Australia, and that's where I got into radio. And the only condition with regard to the payment is you had to stay there for 2 years. So after I got to Australia, I met up with a retired actress who was my sort of only contact, and she suggested that I change my name from von Etzdorf, which is, as you know, my real name, to something a bit more catchy for the Australians. So she came up with JJ, although John is my name, Jonathan John. So she came up with the JJ bit, and I then went to the Max Rowley School of Announcing, who was a very famous guy in Sydney, and along with a lot of other people. And then after a while, we managed to make a tape and for various tapes and send them off to various stations. And I was very lucky to get a job on 4MK Mackay on the Queensland coast, a beautiful tropical area. Lots of rain, though, but very, very pleasant otherwise, very warm, obviously. And then from then, I went to 4LM Mount Isa, which was in the middle of Queensland, totally different, very dry heat. But again, one step up from where I've been before, so it was a progression of sorts. And unfortunately, I have to say, after that, my 2 years were up, and I decided to come back, which is really a shame, because, I mean, Australia in 2 years, you know, I did very little as far as travel goes, but I certainly got into the radio scene.
How did the job at Radio Caroline come about?
The Radio Caroline job came about because when I came back in 71, 73, I tried to time it with the arrival of the commercial radio, and I think, and you put me straight on this, when Capital started. I applied for it, but of course, well, not of course, but it just happened that, you know, there were some real heavyweights sort of going for that as well, like Kenny Everett and Dave Cash, to name but two, and I didn't get it. I didn't get in. I had a very broad Aussie accent, maybe that was it. And anyway, I then met up with Terry Bates, who was involved with Caroline, or had been, and he suggested that that might be an avenue, an opening. So I said, you know, and found out about that it was on a ship, and so I had no idea really. I mean, obviously I'd heard of it from the 60s, but I wasn't that really involved in it those days. And I decided to go and see Ronan. So I saw Ronan, and the rest is history, as they say.
Downtown with Johnny Jason. Just for you.
After stints at Metro Radio, Radio Orwell and LBC, and rejoining Radio Caroline, you came to Radio City in Liverpool. What was your time at Radio City like?
Radio City was absolutely fantastic. It was, I mean, obviously totally different to being on Caroline, but I mean, you know, as commercial radio stations go, by far the best place I've been. Mainly because of the people, you know, there. We had some marvellous people there as well. One of my old pals, unfortunately dead now, Phil Easton with the Great Eastern Express. I mean, we gelled mainly because of the music, I suppose, because, of course, he was an ace rock jock, you know, and I'd been doing that on Caroline, playing all the sort of amazing album stuff. Chris Jones was there, you know, Kevin Curtis, Dave Lincoln, very nice guy. There were all sorts of people there, so it was a good team again. So we did very well, I think, because of that. We had a nice blend of personalities and music as well.
Downtown was a really good programme to present, wasn't it? Because you could play some very, very fine music. And, of course, you had the highly acknowledged Peaceful Hours.
Indeed, yes. Downtown you were given a bit of freedom on there, which was great, because, of course, that's what I'd been used to on Caroline, and so I really relished that. In that, as you say, you could play virtually. It was really dictated by the listeners. They wrote in and said, "Look, can you play me so and so?" And it was more or less a request show.
Was it a big wrench to leave Radio City?
Yeah, I can't honestly. I think I could be corrected here, but I think the reason for leaving was maybe the fact that would you believe, the lure of the ship again, which I think was still going. And in fact, I remember meeting Johnny Walker that time, because we were going to go back with him, and so that sounded a really good reason to return there. But the whole thing foundered, so I did something else then. I think I went up to Granton TV.
The only date I'm going to mention is this one. In 1995, you joined the BBC World Service, to which you're still there. How do you find the BBC way of working?
I have to say, Brian, I love the BBC, and not so much. Maybe I should pare it down a bit. I work at the World Service, which is, and certainly had then when I joined, as very much its own sort of style and kudos and so on. Very highly respected, as you know, around the world, because it's most people's only link to London and so on, to England when they're abroad, and. I really loved it, and I've loved it ever since, because it's a real sort of niche of again, a nice team of people who don't mind working overnight, which is what I do out of choice, I have to say, and because when you're doing overnights, you're very much a smaller sort of team. I mean, at the moment, you see, BBC, when it moved into its news offices at New Broadcasting House, it's got masses of people there. So if you go in during the day, you get a real shock. Well, I did anyway when I went in there recently. I couldn't believe how many people were there. But of course, the whole of the BBC is there now. But I mean, work-wise, I much prefer to work in a much smaller team, and you're able to get some sort of ambiance there. Although our new facility is not quite the same, obviously, as Bush House where we were, which had a lot of history to it.
I was amazed, because I think it was round about the year 2000, and I was just listening into the World Service overnight, and it was the top of the hour news, and I just heard this voice, and I thought, Peaceful Hours, Radio City, that's Johnny Jason, and I just couldn't believe you were there. It was just totally amazing to hear your voice, and your voice hasn't really changed over the years.
No, it hasn't. I don't think it has. It's difficult for me to say that, but yeah, I mean, I have to say, people who hear me tell me that I'm very good at putting you back to sleep again if you're an insomniac. So, I've got a fairly sort of soft voice, I think, so maybe that's what people like,
I can state this, I am an insomniac.
Yeah.
And it doesn't work with me, Johnny.
Failed miserably.
No, successfully, because it means I listen to radio a lot longer.
Well, it's good to have you there.
Can I just finally now thank you for taking the time and the trouble to chat to us on the Brian Jones Radio City Tribute website, because I know there's a bit of a distance between us today, because you live abroad at the moment. So
I do. I live in southwest France. It's a beautiful day here. I hope it's the same with you. Lovely sunshine, quite warm, so it's very pleasant. Which is one of the reasons we came out here.
I wish. I can tell you at the moment, as we're recording this interview, it's cloudy and it's raining, but it's quite mild.
Oh, well, that's all right, Brian. Bad luck.
Many thanks indeed, Johnny Jason.
Thank you very much, Brian. Lovely to speak to you.
To hear the full version of this interview, please go to www.citygold.me.uk.